I've always wanted to be a world citizen, carrying on, because I was a revolutionary before I came out of high school. Grew up in the Central area. My mom was a maid and still is at 77. She's still a maid. She taught me how to read and write before I went to kindergarten. So I was always a star student. Got into advanced classes in elementary school and math and English and social studies. Kept it up. Got to be a commencement speaker at high school and Mensa nominee and National Merit Scholar and all the hoopla. But I was living in Holly Park and the projects of Seattle. But even those were multicultural, so. And I grew up with a bunch of kids, and we all grew up and went to elementary school and junior high school. And then I went to a 60% Asian high school and had an Asian art teacher who taught me cartooning and some calligraphy. And so nowadays I mix my calligraphy with pointillism, and I got a little impressionist, pointillist, Asian influence thing going on with my art. So I got my own style together, and I loved growing up in Seattle, and I thought I was pretty privileged. And once I got out to the UW and carrying on and started in the movement, I got to travel around the country and see what the rest of the world was like, and was duly surprised that it wasn't as liberal and nice as Seattle was. So. Good education, but learned quick. So. At age 5, my uncle drew some cartoons of Beetle Bailey from the newspaper. He was a commercial artist, did sign painting and carrying on, but he was a great craftsman, and he could do Gothic script and carrying on with pens and calligraphy. And so I fell in love with that at age 5, and I promised to be an artist from then on, and that's what I used to do in school. Instead of doing homework and carrying on, I'd sit up and draw cartoons, and then I'd go to the library. I learned how to draw mostly from just studying the library and checking out art books, basics, and escalated up as years went by. And only thing I wanted to be was an artist. I said, my mom didn't want me to be an artist. She wanted me to be a teacher or something. And I said, no, I'm going to be an artist. I said, then nobody gets a vote on that. That's the only thing I was interested in. Except I was interested in writing, got to be on the journalism staff at high school and all kinds of other cutie pie stuff. But art was always my study, and got good at it. I worked at it. And never managed to learn much at the UW. When I came to art school, I got D's in art. I was too fast and too good for the art professors, and then I was drawing black people, and they told me I shouldn't be drawing black people because it was limiting me. And I said, well, white people draw white people, Asian people draw Asian people, Latinos draw Latin people. Why can't black people paint black people? I said, black people need black images. So I had a hard time at the UW and arguments with a number of my professors, and then I dropped out of the art program and went into interdisciplinary studies so I could write my own curriculum, and that helped out a lot. Found my favorite professors over in the art school, and they let me do what I wanted to do and learn what I wanted to learn, and so then I got over. I was always lower class, and I got into more trouble with the black middle class students than I ever did with white students or anybody else. And so coming out here at the UW, I was into dancing, partying, having a good time, and still retaining my Afro-Americanness. And most of the students, the black students out here, were all into trying to be white and look white and to carry themselves in that manner. And they didn't want to acknowledge James Brown and the music of the lower classes, and it scared me. And they were different. And so when we started out here at the UW, most of the students were in the Afro-American Students Association, which was mildly into civil rights, but not into wanting to upset the order. They thought that things could be moderated through the petitioning at best, but most of them weren't into doing anything like that. They were more into playing bid whist. And I had already been in the SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and in Central area, and I had been on a couple of marches in Seattle, and I was in no mood for it, and I came in complaining, and I had troubles both with my art professors and with the rest of the students, except I found a few who were a bit more raucous and a bit more elemental, and so we started hanging out together. And Stokely Carmichael came to Garfield High School preaching Black Power, and so most of the community and most of the activists came out at 68 and turned on. And the next thing you know, we were at a Black Power conference in LA, and we decided we were going to come back and start a Black Student Union. So a small cadre of us, which is about, 20, 25 people, and we came back and took over democratically the Afro-American Student Association and changed it to the Black Student Union by outvoting them. But we brought in folks from the community. We learned democracy, and we learned that if you outvoted them. And so nobody checked your credentials whether you were a student or not. So we brought in about 25 or 30 extra students from the community and had them vote. And next thing you know, E.J. Brisker and Larry Gossett were elected presidents of the Black Student Union, changed the name, and got to be history after that. And so we were agitating, and we learned how to pack a meeting and how to pack a vote. Because I said, I never liked Robert's Rules of Order, and I said, well, if you're revolutionary, what do we need with Robert's European Rules of Order? But I said, I let it be. I said, well, I know how to use that system. Outvote somebody, and all of a sudden you win. So that was pretty much the beginning of the situation, and it was strange. And because I was a commencement speaker in high school, and I preached against racism and the Vietnam War in '66, and so I was always anti-war, anti-racism, human rights. I was a Malcolm X fan, not a Martin Luther King fan, and so I wasn't into peaceful disobedience. I said, if you talk crazy to me, I'm allowed to hit you, and hit you real hard, because I had been martial arts trained. Being at an Asian high school, I had to learn Asian martial arts for self-defense, or I was always getting a foot put in my face by some of my classmates who all studied down in Chinatown, and they were little martial arts experts, and so I had to learn that for self-defense because we had a lot of fun.
It's interesting.
Oh yeah, well, we never fought. They were all my friends, and we had a great time. I was a yell leader, and I had half the squad was Asian, and we jumped around and partied and all that kind of stuff together. And so I was learning the martial arts was just fun for us and carrying on. But it made me pretty fearless when I got up into college. I said, well, all you can do is kill me. But other than that, you're not going to talk crazy to me, and you're not going to hit me. And but I did get beat up at 68 during the Martin Luther King riots when he got killed. I was up in the Central area just watching, and the phalanx of police came down the street, and I got beat black and blue because I ran into a house. The police came into the house with my pregnant wife and beat me black and blue and beat her out the door and carrying on. And I was not happy after that, but I had to run the gauntlet of about 8 policemen, and they were each clubbing me. And that was the last free lick I allowed anybody to have on me, though. I'm still not happy about that. But I was already a student at the UW, and we had the Black Student Union started up, and I was in the Black Panther Party. I was a Minister of Arts and Culture for the Black Student Union and the Black Panther Party at the same time. But I quit the Black Panther Party when they went down to Olympia, and they hadn't told me, but they went down to Olympia with guns that were unloaded, and the legislature passed a bill outlawing that, bringing guns out in public immediately, within about 15 minutes. But I couldn't believe anybody would be stupid enough to show up in front of state troopers with unloaded guns. I said, I wouldn't mind the demonstration if you had loaded guns, but unloaded guns was pretty dumb. So I said I couldn't hang around people who were that dumb, because I was into protecting myself, and for years I carried a gun on campus. Oh yeah. Did I need it? Well, between I had more fear of people like the black Muslims than I did of the police, because the Muslims were, a friend of mine named Donald Ponder was in the Muslims, and I didn't want to be a Muslim because I knew what Malcolm had gone through dealing with them, and that he'd got killed by Muslims. And I said, they're dangerous. You know, they'll kill black people. They don't go out and kill white people, but they'll kill black people. And I said, well, I'm not into being an innocent. I don't mind being guilty. So no, my protection was mainly against black people. I was worrying about some cats who, because they always wanted me to join, and I said, no, it's not my style. I'm not a communist. I'm not a socialist. And I had studied Diego Rivera, a revolutionary artist from Mexico, which is why I got into being a muralist. But he had had a lot of trouble with the Communist Party, getting kicked out, brought back in, kicked out again, and all this other kind of stuff. And so I'd studied radical movements before I got into my radical era. And I was a revolutionary of a new breed, and one of them was not join up with people who were silly, ignorant, or dictatorial. And I didn't want a committee deciding what I should paint. So I was a mix. I wasn't so much a capitalist, but I was an individualist. And I was pro-individual rights, which is human rights, and I didn't want any committee, whether they were white, black, or otherwise, to start telling me what to do. I was late for the revolution. There were 2 people that day who went up the rope. I was one of them. Yes. And I was the second one I see, because everybody else got photos of the first guy. But I had to get pulled up. EJ and Larry Gossett and the gang, they pulled me up because I was late, because the night before I was up calling the African Student Union and a number of other people. I used to work with the office women doing office work rather than being a leader out front, like Larry and EJ and the guys. They were out being the spokespeople. And I like to stay back and just do work and occasionally write, create. I was a creative thinker, but I didn't want to be a front man because they always ended up in jail, and I didn't want to go to jail. I couldn't see the profit in it. So I came in late, about 11:30, 12 o'clock. Everything was already taken over. So they hauled me up on the rope, and I was only there for a couple of hours before UW administration agreed to terms, and all of a sudden we were loose. But we were afraid, while we were inside, we were afraid that state troopers and all that stuff, who were, I think, over in one of the other halls that had a connecting underground tunnel to it, were going to come up into the building and just beat us out of there. So we were trying to barricade things and all that kind of good stuff, and people were ripping off televisions and other stuff from Odegaard's office and all kinds of little petty hoodlumisms, but we had a nice crowd, a multi-ethnic crowd of Latinos and Indian students and white students and Asian students, and so it was a multi-ethnic takeover and just led by the Black Student Union. And then outside there was a nice large crowd who were thinking that this was a very strange thing happening, and some of them were supporters and others were just lookers that they couldn't believe that we'd actually, but we threatened for a while before we did it, and we tried to negotiate, tried to talk to them about, but they kept delaying, and we decided that direct action would work better, and it worked out. It scared me that it actually worked. We got flack from the black community, the older establishment. A few of them were our supporters behind the scenes, which was a whole nother little story, but they were moderators and trying to keep us from becoming more violent in terms of our demonstrations. And I was threatening to blow up the UW's atomic little power plant on campus because y'all don't give me my rights. I'm paying to go to this university, and you don't have a class that relates to me. You don't even talk. My art professors told me there weren't any black artists of national merit. And I'm sitting up here saying, one of you is missing, because I got books that list Afro-American artists of international repute, and you're going to sit up in this class and tell me that, and I'm paying to come here to get an education, and you're miseducating me. I'm upset. And so I tell you I'm upset and you ignore me. I said, well, you don't understand. I'll do something to get you to pay attention. And so, but then most of my compatriots were a little bit milder mannered than that. They were into marching, and to take over the administration building was a mutual accord. I said, well, I can understand that. That'll get somebody's attention, because we knew some people from the press. And I got to give one of the first speeches for the Black Student Union over on Hippie Hill with Larry Gossett. We gave him a speech, and we got coverage in the Daily and carrying on. So it was the big coming out of the Black Student Union in '68, just a couple of months before we decided on the administration building. But we were all middle class, well educated, and the best and the brightest. And we weren't trying to take over the university as much as try to get the university to give us some leeway and to allow us to have our voice and our faces in classes and in professors and in the institution itself. And we wanted to change it that way in terms of it being additions. We didn't want to shut down everything. We wanted to add ours. And we wrote up programs and projects to try to do that. And my bright idea was the Ethnic Culture Center, which is, I'm still proud of that. 40 years later, almost, but I got to write the proposal for the creating of the Ethnic Culture Center, a multi-ethnic center with a library, study skills center, theater, because I was a cultural expert, and I believed that the revolution would be better being nonviolent if we could have some cultural institutions. I think we were successful in making primary inroads into the institutions and allowing us participation into the institution. We got a Black Studies program. We got a Black and minority recruitment program for recruiting high school students from around the state and around the country. And that brought a lot more people on campus and into the educational environment and gave them a chance to join the middle class by having a good education. And we got a number of those programs both funded and carrying on, and they still continue to this day. Though the funding has gone down, the recruitment has gone down. There's not that kind of activism in terms of actually going out, and Larry Gossett and the gang used to go out to all the high schools and talk to them and have assemblies and try to recruit students, best and the brightest, to try to come to the UW. And we were successful in that, and we worked in the community with breakfast programs, and they co-opted that, and Next thing you know, the schools were offering free breakfast programs for poor students, free lunches. I worked with a number of civil rights organizations in the community because I was always wanting that the university, with the best and the brightest, would have the students turn their skills over to community groups who needed to learn how to organize and learn how to petition the government so that they had power within their community to influence the direction of their community in health care and education, welfare, prisons. We used to, the Black Student Union, Black Panther Party used to have buses that went out to, took family members out to McNeil Island and Walla Walla and Monroe. And I used to teach art classes and math and some English classes at the prisons. And we were successful in doing that for a while, but the people got tired who were doing all that because it was just a small number of us that were actually getting that done. And we each grew older and developed into various other skills and evolved. But I consider our main failure of the 70s movement in Black Power was that we failed to teach and train and develop the next generation to follow us. We didn't train the next generation of Black Student Union leaders. We didn't train the next generation of student activists in the community. And so once we left and went on to our various other careers and options, there was nobody there. We hadn't institutionalized our training and passed on our information and our skills to the next generation. And so things started falling apart right quick. So during the late 70s and the early 80s, when they stopped funding a lot of the anti-poverty programs in the Nixon era, the bottom fell out around the country and around Seattle in terms of activism and just institutional involvement. A lot of people were in and out, so it was, I always considered that our main failure was to educate the next generation. When I was 21, after we'd taken over the administration building and they decided to build the Ethnic Culture Center in Carrying On, one of the things I also proposed was creating an Afro-American art history class. And sure enough, I talked to Dean at the art school, and they paid me to research, develop, and to teach a course, Afro-American art history. I was 21 years old. No degree, no paperwork. They sent me around the country. I got airplanes and hotels and per diem, and I got to go to all the major museums and have a nice little letter from the UW and show up at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and they took me up into the archives and I could go through papers of noted artists around the world and all this kind of stuff, and found a number of Afro-American artists and took slides of their work and got biographies and all that kind of stuff and brought it back. Wrote the curriculum for my class, taught for about a quarter, and before the quarter ended, they told me they weren't renewing it. It was just going to be for that one little quarter, and they'd stuck it off into the humanities department, but instead of renewing the class, they decided to hire Jacob Lawrence to come out to the UW and to be a professor. And Jacob Lawrence was a well-known New York artist in Carrying On, and so I had met some friends of his because I was in a National Conference of Artists, which was a national black artist nonprofit organization. But I'd gone to some conferences and I got to hang out with historic black artists and just had a great time because they let me in and I got to hang out and drink bourbon and listen to the old folks talk about what they'd gone through and what they were thinking about. And I was part of the new generation, and they were encouraging and it was really fun, and it was great that they brought in Jacob Lawrence, but they didn't continue the class in Afro-American art history. So after that was in '72, and I quit. I just cut it loose. I said, if I can't make a institutional change of that nature in terms of just getting a class that continues, I'm out of here, and I'll try something else. I was in the human rights struggle. I mean, I wanted gay rights, women's rights. My mother brought me up by herself. She's always been a single parent and never had a father, never met him. And so she was a strong woman, and she defended me and helped educate me, and if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have been much of anything. So when working with the Black Student Union, it was pretty chauvinist in that the men were all the spokesmen and the women were working in the office doing all the basic work. And so I used to work in the office with the women because I didn't want them to think that the men couldn't do any of the work either, too. And so I said, my mom brought me up to iron, clean, and cook and take care of myself, and came to be a profitable skill. But I married a strong woman who was in college, came out and made some children, and during the '70s, and even after I dropped out of school, I'd come back and work with the women's rights groups, and we'd do improv sort of theater about women's rights over in the Hub, and I participated in that, but I was the only black male doing that. It was like I was always a loner in terms of that. I always hung out with Latino students. I'd go to the Mecha and student meetings, African student meetings, the Asian student meetings. None of my other compadres would hang out that way, and I used to hang out just to check in with them, let them know what's going on and what we could do to work together rather than working separately. And so women and I go back a long time, and I felt that I have always profited from strong women, and I always wanted another generation of strong women rather than trying to keep them in a place or in their place. They've been the culture bearers. They've been the ones who are perpetuated Afro-American culture more than males. Males are into grandstanding for a little while, but the females are there raising the kids, making sure that the education gets done, making sure that the homework gets done. All those little basic things that keep an institution and keep a culture going are with the women. And that has been the history of Afro-Americans in this country, and it still is. And a lot of the strong institutions from Rosa Parks on is that Martin Luther King and the guys got the credit and the claim, but the folks who did all the organizing back in the office, making the telephone calls, writing all the letters, soliciting funds and doing all that other kind of stuff, making the food for the receptions for the fundraisers and all this other kind of stuff were all women. And I'm sitting up here saying, I'm just a student of history. It's not necessarily being bright on my part, but I'd like to try to make sure that they get credit for that. In high school and still here at the UW, there's still a continuing presence of black student unions and associations to try to deal with the issues that they find current to their issues. But what we had in the 70s was coordination between the college and the high school black student unions, so that we gave them aid and advice on how to institutionalize their demands, how to write them up and present them to the authorities in the school district to try to make changes. And we were trying to be those kind of guides back then, the early part of the movement. And I think that has fallen off. There's still a lot of the black students have been bused to Ballard and Roosevelt and North End schools and West Seattle and carrying on, which has destroyed the core of the black community because they've shipped off the students And they're now separated from the community, and they have very little support organizationally to get things to make a real effect. And they're part social club nowadays, and one can come in and plant their gripes, and they can influence things like have speakers and have cultural programs that include them in terms of the schools. But there's very little of a grand organizational concept going on. They're not necessarily trying to involve themselves in the community and the direction that it's going. The main thing was I just wanted to make sure that people remembered that we failed to institutionalize our next generation, and that's been my main gripe. And now last couple of years I've been hanging out down in Brazil, and feeling much better because there's a need for that kind of institutional building down in Brazil, along with in Africa, which AIDS being destroying half the continent, that the next generation needs education and schooling. And so there may be a chance for me to develop the kind of programs and scholastic programs and educational programs that I've been thinking about, trying to continue. I've been continuing to evolve the kinds of programs that I wanted to do and train myself to start that up, either in Brazil or down in South Africa. I haven't followed my own advice. I always advised the other leaders like Larry and EJ to write their own history and to write about what we've gone through so that we can pass it on. And that's one of the keys to institutionalizing your culture, is that you have to write it. People have to write that history so that they can pass it on to the next generation, or to videotape it, or to make films about it. So I spent 2 years in LA. After I dropped out of the UW, I got into the Open Door program with the Writers Guild of America down in LA. And I went down and spent 2 years studying screenwriting with some of the best, Sidney Sheldon and folks. And my writing teacher let me have an agent, turned me on to her agent, and I was around pitching scripts down in Hollywood for a while. Didn't sell anything, came back here and got a Rockefeller grant in playwriting at the Black Arts West, and then I had 3 works produced at the Ethnic Culture Center, being a playwright. Taught a course in playwriting and all that kind of stuff, and experimental college, and had a great time. But I haven't written a lot lately, and that's what part of what I'm doing this year, is that I'm starting to write my history and the history that I saw coming through Black Student Union, Black Power, and try to tell those stories and pass them on